everyone, I am here with your Bible reading. We have a double Bible reading today, so the video might be a little long. We are starting with John chapter 18, verse 1 through 24, stopping at 25, and then reading chapter 19 to verse 22. And then we have our Psalms and our Proverbs if we can get through with it. So we're going to be reading about Jesus' arrest today, Peter's denials of Jesus. Remember, Jesus told Peter he would deny him 3 times before the rooster crowed. Peter said no, he wouldn't. And we're also going to get to Jesus' crucifixion today. So let's go ahead and get started with this. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place, because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. Now remember, Judas had just betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, and Jesus knew what was about to take place. So Judas wanted to come out with, might as well say, a mob of people to a private place where Jesus was going to be off by himself or with his disciples, away from a bunch of people, so they could arrest him. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons, so it was like a big mob. And you know, Jesus would have went with them. They didn't have to do that. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said, and Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people. Now we're getting into Peter's denial, because Peter was following Jesus at a distance to see what was going to happen. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. The servant girl said, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." Now that's his first denial. It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. "I have spoken openly to the world," Jesus replied. "I always taught in synagogues or at the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest, who already wants Jesus done away with. Because the high priest wants to be the most important one. Now we're getting into Peter's second and third denial. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it. At that moment, a rooster began to crow. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. But by now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" Now Pilate didn't want nothing. He didn't want to put Jesus to death. He wanted no part of it. Especially his wife warned Pilate that she had encountered with Jesus in a dream, and she told her husband not to have anything to do with him. She knew he was somebody special. And Pilate felt that he was too, but the people would not shut up. The people would not shut up. He tried to release Jesus, but they wanted no part of it. They wasn't going to have no part of it. So Pilate said, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. They wanted Jesus dead. They wanted him to be no more. They wanted him wiped off the face of the earth. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is the truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas, who they wanted released instead of Jesus, had taken part in an uprising. Barabbas was also a murderer. They wanted a murderer released over Jesus, the Son of God. It's how our world is today. Evil, filled with evil. It's getting worse and worse. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged, thinking that would appease them. And the soldiers tortured Jesus. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. Imagine Jesus there with blood running down his face from these thorns sticking in his head. They clothed him in a purple robe. They were mocking him and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face, and they spit in his face. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law, he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat him down on the judge's seat at a place known as the stone pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified, but not until he washed his hands in a bowl of water and said he washed his hands of it. His death was not going to be on his hands, but on theirs, because he wanted no part of it. But they basically would not let him be. They would not shut up. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus, carrying his own cross. He went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Now remember, Jesus, a lot of the books of the Bible are a little slightly bit different. A guy named Simon had to take over carrying Jesus' cross for him because Jesus was too weak from the beatings and stuff by this time to carry his own cross, which you know is very heavy. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." And that is where we're going to stop today with John. Sherm, are you here? Sherm's not back here. Okay, I didn't know if we'd have time. The camera's sitting on a stool. I pushed the stool out to get up to see if we got time here. It'll fall. So let's just try to go on with the Bible reading, and if the camera stops, I do apologize. So let's get started with Psalm 119, verses 97 through 128. Remember, I told you guys Psalm 119 was a very long psalm. It's one of the longest, if not the longest, in the Bible. Nim says, "Oh, how I love your law. I meditate on it all day long. Your commands are always with me and make me wiser than my enemies. I have more insight than all my teachers, for I meditate on your statutes. I have more understanding than the elders, for I obey your precepts. I have kept my feet from every evil path, so that I might obey your word. I have not departed from your laws, for you yourself have taught me. How sweet are your words to my taste, sweeter than honey to my mouth. I gain understanding from your precepts, therefore I hate every wrong path." And none says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path. I have taken an oath and confirmed it, that I will follow your righteous laws. I have suffered much. Preserve my life, Lord, according to your word. Accept, Lord, the willing praise of my mouth, and teach me your laws. Though I constantly take my life in my hands, I will not forget your law. The wicked have set a snare for me, but I have strayed from your precepts. But I have not strayed from your precepts. Your statutes are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart. My heart is set on keeping your decrees to the very end. Oh, my page went really big, sorry. Okay, and Shammai says, I hate double-minded people, but I love your law. You are my refuge and my shield. I have put my hope in your word. Away from me, you evildoers, that I may keep the commands of my God. Sustain me, my God, according to your promise, and I will live. Do not let my hopes be dashed. Uphold me, and I will be delivered. I will always have regard for your decrees. You reject all who stray from your decrees, for their delusions come to nothing. All the wicked of the earth you discard like dross. Therefore I love your statutes. My flesh trembles in fear of you. I stand in awe of your laws. And Ayin says, I have done what is righteous and just. Do not leave me to my oppressors. Ensure your servant's well-being. Do not let the arrogant oppress me. My eyes fell looking for your salvation, looking for your righteous promise. Deal with your servant according to your love, and teach me your decrees. I am your servant. Give me discernment, that I may understand your statutes. It is time for you to act, Lord. Your law is being broken, because I love your commands more than gold, more than pure gold, and because I consider all your precepts right. I hate every wrong path. Okay, guys, and that's where we're stopping with Psalm 119. And our Proverbs today is Proverbs chapter 16, verses 8 through 11. I'll just go ahead and read them straight down all together. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. The lips of a king speak as an oracle, and his mouth does not betray justice. Honest scales and balances belong to the Lord. All the weights in the bag are of his making. Okay, guys, that was our Bible reading. We got through it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I hope the Bible reading touched your guys' hearts. How was your guys' Memorial Day weekend? Did you guys have a good one? Did you get to go to the cemetery and put any flowers on your loved ones' graves? We don't have a vehicle, so I wasn't able to do that, or I would have. I don't know if anybody actually went there. Sometimes my family has cookouts too. I'm not sure if anybody had one or not. Dad, he's the manager at the golf course at the VA. He probably had a thing up there, I would say, definitely. So I'm sure he had a thing for the veterans and the family up there at the golf course. So Sherm's coming back just in time now. Okay, guys, so I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Let's bring those souls to Jesus, and God willing, we'll see you guys again soon with another Bible reading. Bye, guys. God bless.